First of all, just to say thank you very much for inviting me along here. It is an absolute pleasure to come along to this conference and talk through the activities in Glasgow, principally over the last year and a half. The brief is on supporting our cities, but hopefully the presentation illustrates that this is not possible without partnership working, creativity and choice being the theme of the So I'm just going to press ahead with the presentations and then I'm happy to take questions at the end. Just to start off, and I'm conscious that perhaps most of the delegates will be more than familiar with the context in which Glasgow operates and the complex landscape in which we are all required to work in. But just some brief headlines here. Over a quarter of Glaswegians live in the most deprived Scottish decile, with the highest figure among the Scottish cities. 34% of all children living in Glasgow are estimated to be living in poverty. And there is the synergy and the relationship between the income inequality, the involvement in the justice system, our substance use problem, which has been has received considerable media attention, not least because of the prevalence of drug-related deaths in Glasgow, but also in relation to mental health, homelessness, and I would also add domestic abuse to that, and I will touch on this later on, because that is also equally a feature which exists, sadly, across all of our care groups. In relation to the addiction component of this, we have 13,000 problem drug users, and most of them consuming alcohol as well. So a very disproportionate, high sense of inequality and considerable risks within Glasgow. The other context to this is our rapid rehousing transition plan. And what I've done here is I've just summarised the ethos and the objectives of this, really to set some context as well. Our RRTP is effectively what drives us. The objectives were all approved at our Integrated Joint Board in 2019, and all of the performance and all of the objectives associated with the RRTP is what permeates the work that we do. So the systemic shift that is requires a whole system approach, which I'm going to hopefully describe a bit better in just a moment. But the whole system requiring to shift, and acceptance that more of the same won't do, really has to be the mantra and moving forward. And with that, a sense of genuine partnership working that has to exist as well, and taking all of this forward. The lived experience role, not only within homelessness, but within addiction services, within mental health, within all of the public protection domains within the HSCP, is absolutely critical to us. And I will touch on this in some of the remaining slides. And an ability to challenge the status quo is one of the key themes within our RRTP agenda, that makes sure that we are constantly challenge ourselves, that we are outward looking as an organisation, and especially as an HSCP, accepting and willing to change based on new findings, contemporary research, lived experience commentary, and so on. The objectives that were agreed were the following 5 objectives: to prevent homelessness wherever possible, to ensure that all homelessness can access settled accommodation quickly, and to upscale housing first, work with alliance partners to reduce the requirement and the time spent in temporary accommodation, and to invest in the delivery of person-centred supports. Okay, so in relation to the partnerships and the person-centred services, a core element of the RRTP is about expanding choice. I'm not going to pretend that hasn't been affected somewhat significantly in the last 18 months. This is a completely unprecedented time, and some of those our objectives have been, it's fair to say, constrained by the demands of 2 fairly significant episodes of lockdown. But the RRTP agenda remains on track, and for the lifetime of the RRTP, we're still confident about succeeding in our objectives. But the partnership working and the co-production of services remains absolutely critical in improving the outcomes for service users. And I will touch on a slide around where we are with the Glasgow Alliance. The other thing to mention is really about the trauma-informed approach, and I know there's been some discussion on that here today. This is one of the main values of having a whole system HSCP. The trauma-informed approach is as prevalent in justice services as it is in adult services and children's services. So our homelessness services as part of the HSCP allows us therefore to tap into that really emerging culture and a really strong trauma-informed culture when we're working with service users, particularly with complexity of needs and a background of trauma, and again arriving at a care plan that allows us to put that into context and allows us to really have an informed decision around those care plans. So working with the Alliance partnership and the people with lived experience, again, central to the approach. The Alliance recruitment itself was led by lived experience, who were key panel members and who are very much involved in the short leading process. So the lived experience is critical to the development of our women's services, for example, when I'd mentioned about our strategy around domestic abuse, our addiction services in relation to the recovery communities, and also a requirement around adult protection and child protection to make sure that what we are doing is listening to people in terms of their own care plan objectives. So moving on to one of the themes of this presentation, which is really about our response in the last 18 months and part of the recovery agenda. The context of the first lockdown episode brought about new challenges for the HSCP, a requirement to ensure vulnerable citizens had access to support and accommodation. And it's helpful to see that in the context, not just in homelessness services, but the demands placed on us in relation to our own statutory services, including our out-of-hours emergency social work standby services, where homelessness also remained part of that. But in the context of a 5-month period of almost no general letting from RSLs until the very end of August, it really did make this problem significantly more acute. The city centre risk increased quite significantly with a requirement to repurpose our hotels in the city, with an influx of the hotel population, and an increased prevalence rate in the city of drugs and alcohol, some offending behaviour, and at the same time, no court activity in which to address much of that. So in response to that, we had a city centre partnership risk management meeting, an oversight group, if you may, with third sector, with police, with the HSCP. And attached to that was a red, amber and green system that at the beginning of was almost all red. And there was about 20 different key themes to this risk. And by the end of it, almost all of them had been mitigated against in terms of risk. Again, testament to the absolute strength of the partnership working. So the dynamic partnerships, we were all required to mobilise ourselves and rethink things differently. First of all, within the HSCP, our addiction services, our mental health, homelessness, coming together in a way that perhaps we hadn't done so in the past. Our Housing First consortium partners, consisting of Turning Point Scotland, Simon Community, Wheatley Care, Salvation Army, our commission service in relationship and partnership with the Simon Community by way of outreach in the city centre of Glasgow. Our relationship in the last 18 months with Scottish Government and policy advisors has also been considerably developed, I would say, in my opinion. The relationship with Scottish Refugee Council right at the very beginning of all of this, and making sure that we were mitigating against any risk, particularly in relation to those with no recourse to public funds, and how we had to repurpose our hotels in order to cater for that. And again, a relationship with police, particularly a relationship with police in the city centre of Glasgow in relation to the risk. Our alliance partners who are Aspire, Crossreach, Mungo Foundation, Sacro, Salvation Army, Wheatley Care, and Y People, all deploying a range of different supports, mostly connecting in to the hotels. I should have probably added at the beginning of this that our hotel population last September had peaked at well in excess of 600 people living in hotels at that point. But everybody coming together and making sure that the complexity and need was addressed, not only with the service users, but equally with those that were working in hotels at the time, who, in many respects, this was a new feature for them. The hotel owners providing mental health support, naloxone distribution, for example. Working with people with lived experience during that process, again, was absolutely critical. What people were telling us about the accommodation was extremely important to us. But equally, things like food provision, laundry facilities, for example, allowed us to really be quite fleet of foot and be able to address some of these as and when they were arising. And it wasn't just the interface, clearly, with the HSCP, it was what our third sector partners were also telling us. It allowed us to rapidly stand up our services and to not only reduce rough sleeping, but to sustain this figure. During the whole of the 18 months, our rough sleeping figures have been maintained in single figures, notwithstanding that we have some challenges for a very small group of habitual rough sleepers within the city. But as recent as only last week, I, in my capacity as Assistant Chief Officer for Public Protection, I provided with the care plans for those that reside and that are continue to sleep rough. But I think it's testament to everybody's commitment to this, for a city like Glasgow and the complexity of need, where we have sustained our rough sleeping population in single figures. Again, in relation to COVID-19 response and recovery, there has to be considerable reflections on this as we move forward. And I'm conscious that the theme of today's conference has also already touched on some of this. Opportunities for learning, being open, being reflective, giving consideration to new ways of working. Part of our success within the HSCP was always this requirement to stand up and be outreaching, to retain the face-to-face set of arrangements, to make sure that we were still proactively engaging with people with particular complex needs, again, who were not only residing in the hotel, but through our outreach services, for a workforce to continue to work through the pandemic and still be outreaching was really, really important to us. Working with Vanguard Scotland as part of the RRTP redesign, to making sure that we're continuing to develop efficiencies in the way that will benefit the service users, to reduce bureaucracy wherever we can and continue to retain our focus on that despite the additional demands of the pandemic. Continue to develop and upscale the housing first approach. Our figures pre-COVID were 116. We are now round about 250. So we have continued to improve on that. We've continued to develop. Our target for housing first over the lifetime of our RTP is 600. And we continue to focus on that. And that continues to be our aim. And that remains our target. The co-location of homelessness social care workers in the homelessness hub with the Simon community in Argyle Street, looking at the standing up of that during what was an obviously really difficult time and considerable challenges, again, is absolutely testament to the commitment to making sure that is opened. And our work with our registered social landlord colleagues to secure in the last year 3,300 lets to homelessness households, an increase of 900 in the previous year. And that is despite that period of 5-month lockdown. And it's also despite the challenges of new ways of working and home working and Teams calls and everything else that goes with it, and everything that has made the last 18 months more challenging. One of our features of RRTP was really about addressing multiple adversity or complex needs. And this was a target of our RTP, to develop and to stand up a multi-agency case management approach, addressing everything and all the nuanced complexities of adult mental health, of adult protection, of homelessness, justice, substance misuse, coming together around all of that to reduce bureaucracy, to create efficiencies, to make sure that the service user felt that they were at the centre of all of this. At the beginning of COVID, we were coming out the tail end of a 3-year review of what was our homelessness health service, our homelessness health service and our homeless addiction team. This was an opportunity really to expedite this and bring this to the fore. So in the last 18 months, we have significantly upscaled this team. This team are based in Hunter Street in Glasgow, and they're now a team of more than 55 staff. A really broad skill mix of advanced nurse prescribers, of social care workers, general nursing, CPN, we've got GPs, we have housing first practitioners, and we have access to psychology and psychiatry services. A really broad-ranging, really multidisciplinary team that have really stood up in the last 18 months, are in-reaching in the city, are mobile, are not clinic-based, as I'd mentioned earlier on, in-reaching constantly into the hotels. The other initiative that we stood up during the last 18 months was our commitment to the investment into our Glasgow Alliance to End Homelessness. Again, this was a key feature of our RRTP to deliver a large-scale transformational change in the city across purchase service sector, redesigning and modernising the homelessness system in Glasgow Alliance, but they will transform the purchase homelessness services within Glasgow. So I've given a very brief synopsis of where we are with this just now. The tender was issued in May 2019. Lived experience was really front and centre of all of this as part of the tendering process and as part of the interview arrangements and the short leading. And the Glasgow Alliance to End Homelessness was established in February 2020 with a current reflection on what we've learnt now from COVID and how that will continue to redesign as we move forward. The transition year itself had commenced in July 2020 and has since been formally operational now since June 2021. 7 partner organisations, which I'd mentioned earlier on, are part of this, part of the Alliance, and lived experience will continue and will remain integral to the model. The co-production with the lived experience will again remain heart of the Alliance and will remain a key feature of our RRTP objectives. By way of update, the group, the Alliance now have pulled together what they deem to be the 16 strategic priorities, which will be the work over the coming 12 months. And all of these will be underpinned by the Glasgow HSCP RRTP performance objectives. I want to try and conclude, and not necessarily on something negative, so we'll come on in a moment with other slides, but I think it's fair to say that it's not been easy. We anticipate that there is going to be quite considerable bumps on the road as we move forward. I've summarised really 4 that we can kind of think of just now. There will be many more. We anticipate the impact of COVID. We impact the financial consequences on families, the stresses in families, the implications for employment, for example, and what that will look like in moving forward. And we have partly mitigated some of this to the best of our knowledge more recently with our repurposing of our RRTP financial programme, investing in a benefit welfare system. We've invested in benefit welfare practitioners, I should say, and also with additional mediators to come in and negotiate that with families. Accommodation order introduction of this month will undoubtedly place significant pressure on us. We are currently working on ways and means in which to mitigate that. As an HSCP, we are supportive of the principles of the order itself, but we equally recognise that this is going to bring about quite considerable challenges for us at quite a difficult time. The third matter in here that is really worthwhile mentioning is maintaining the pace. We recognise that people are tired, and we equally recognise that we need to look after each other right across the piece. It has been a frantic pace in which we've been working at in the last 18 months, not only with the HSCP, but across all of our key partners. And And moving forward, the challenge will be maintaining the pace and maintaining the success. And the final matters around no recourse to public funds. We have stepped this up under the auspice of what is a public health crisis, but we've still got a considerable piece of work to do as we move out of the pandemic and continue to try and mitigate any episodes of destitution for this population of no recourse to public funds. And we know that that will continue to be a challenge for us as we move forward. So the last slide that I want to leave everybody on is a couple of slides here on the Belgrove Hotel. I'm going to assume that most people will know the Belgrove Hotel, and the depiction of the Belgrove Hotel is fairly synonymous with our homeless population in Glasgow. It's probably fair to say it's been a long-standing eyesore in Glasgow, and as part of our RRTP plan, we had a commitment to removing everybody from there, all of the men that were living in there at the time, and prevent the need for its use in the future. You will be aware that the Belgrove Hotel are not funded by the HSCP. And when we became involved in this quite recently, there were 57 men in there living with a broad range of complex needs. On the 1st of April this year, it was acquisitioned by Glasgow City Council and the Wheatley Group. And we set ourselves a very ambitious target to have all 57 men removed from there and placed in accommodation based on their assessed need and their choice. All the men were moved out within 3.5 months, and the Belgrove closed its doors for the last time. I should say at this point that it was a truly remarkable piece of partnership working that definitely demonstrates the art of the possible when we come together like this. This slide here just simply depicts where the men had went. It's important to point out that they didn't move to hotel accommodation. It's also important to point out that whilst there's been a lot of discussion on the hotel population the hotels themselves being repurposed in Glasgow, that the hotel population only accounts for between 10 and 15% of our overall homeless accommodation, with the remainder mostly residing in temporary furnished accommodation. So out of the 57, 38 were rehoused, 19 to supported accommodation, 32 were rehoused in Glasgow, with a breakdown of 22 being provided by the Wheatley Group and 10 from other registered social landlords. It would be important to point out at this time that the other social landlords included Parkhead, Reedvale, York Hill, Shettleston, New Gorbals, Maryhill and Govan Hill. What I'm now going to do is to pass you on to a brief video which I think illustrates the sense of partnership working and the sense of choice extremely well. So if I can pass this over now, please, if it's okay, to David.
The Wheatley Group purchased the hotel on the 1st of April 2021, and I was brought in to manage the property due to my experience in homelessness and building-based services.
Hi, I'm Josephine Byrne. I'm a housing officer with Glasgow Housing Association. I've been involved with the customers moving from Belgrove to my patch. I think what's been key as a housing officer for this to happen quite smoothly is the effective working relationship that we've had with Wheatley Care and just how they've supported them and interacted with the housing officers so that we can get to know our customers a bit better and help out with their needs.
Hi there, my name is Darren Kennedy. I'm the Housing First Coordinator for the Wheatley Group. I played a huge part in the role of moving all of our customers from the Belgrove Hotel into mainstream tenancies. It was a remarkable achievement by all involved in being able to move as many people as we did in such a short space of time. This was achieved through positive partnership working and wouldn't have been able to have been achieved without that. All customers were able to get accommodation in areas where they had chosen to live through the Wheatley Group. We were able to furnish all of these properties in advance of these customers moving in, and on some occasions decorating where that was required. The partnership working between HSCP, Wheatley Care and our partners at Glasgow City Council was instrumental in achieving this. Not to forget the huge efforts that was put in place by our contractors to turn these void properties over as quickly as they did in order to get people into these properties as quickly as we were able to do so and meet the timescales.
The staff team that worked here at the Belle Grove providing housing support were brought in from 3 different teams within Wheatley Care. Some staff came from the Fortnight Service, some staff came from the Personalising SDS for Mental Health Service, and some staff were brought in from the Glasgow Flexible Housing Outreach Support Service. This afforded us a diverse range of skills, which in turn provided a comprehensive support for the people who were living in the hotel. We were unsure when we first came to the hotel the reception that we would receive. Having a support service within the hotel for 12 hours a day, it became clear very quickly that the engagement from the guys was significant. They were eager to meet the team, they were eager to discuss their support needs, and through extremely successful partnership working with HSCP and the individuals living within the hotel, we were quickly able to identify the best course of action in terms of move on for everybody who lived in the hotel.
One of the things we looked at throughout the course of the hotel work was the environment and where we as a team could provide support. We wanted an environment where we could provide a safe place, but it wasn't too overwhelming. We found that an open plan space created a comfortable and easygoing atmosphere. We were able to replicate this layout within the Belle Grove as well as have a booth-like set-up for privacy and confidentiality. The support we provided went at a pace that suited the individual, with Wheatley Care staff being available for when the individual felt the time was right for them. This worked exceptionally well, with the engagement levels being at their highest within the first 2 weeks.
I'm Mary Henderson and I was the project lead for the closure of the Belle Grove for the HSCP. In March of this year, Wheatley, in conjunction with the council, managed to buy the building, which was really, really positive. What I think really worked was the really close working relationship with Wheatley Care. I'd already built up positive working relationships with the managers from Wheatley Care through the closure of the Alexander Thompson and the Charter Lodge in Govan. And I think that made a huge difference to being able to move the men on effectively. We managed to work really closely with other parts of the HSCP, including addictions, mental health, adult services for older people, and the close working relationships that we were able to establish and influence the other RSLs to come on board. And we managed to rehouse everyone out of the 57 men. We managed to rehouse everyone apart from 19 who have gone on to live in supported accommodation and will be continually supported by the HSCP to eventually move to their own tenancy in line with the Refugee Housing Transition Plan.
Hi, my name's Glenda Hobbs and I'm one of the caseworkers who was involved in the closure of Belle Grove. We engaged the men at the beginning of the closure programme. We went into the Belle Grove and we were the first people they met from Glasgow City Council, and we assessed the needs of the men and identifying the most appropriate move-on plan for the guys.
As a health and wellbeing coordinator, my role at the Belle Grove Hotel involved building trusting relationships with the people we work for. This enabled me to carry out individual person-centred Outcome Star assessments. Outcome Star is a collaborative tool that is used to identify persons' goals and jointly develop action plans to achieve these goals with the person. There are 10 outcomes in the STAR, and since introducing the support, there has been significant improvement in a number of areas, especially managing tenancy and accommodation, self-care and living skills, and alcohol and drug misuse.
Once Outcome Star assessments were completed, Health and Wellbeing coordinators organised multi-agency assessments involving the casework teams, Housing First, mental health and addiction teams and occupational therapists. This would help identify more suitable accommodation and support after moving on from the Belle Grove Hotel. All the individuals we worked with moved to one of the 3 housing destinations, namely a commission service, Scottish Secure Tenancy with outreach support, or Scottish secure tenancy with no long-term support for those who did not require it.
The first individual to move on from the Belgrove is living within a GHA tenancy and is receiving ongoing support from the tenancy support services. Weekly care staff working with the individuals living within the Belgrove supported the individuals to move on successfully by arranging a van to move on, ensuring he had all the essential items to move in, such as furniture, food parcels and energy crisis fund. Staff also tapped into the Halliday Foundation, who provided the individual with items to make a house a home.
A big part of the work we carried out while working in the Belgrove was liaising with Housing First to make sure when the individuals were moving on, all of their needs were being met. One of the individuals successfully moved into a GHA tenancy, and staff organised food parcels, also carried out wellbeing visits and phone calls to make sure the individual had a successful resettlement as possible. I've also noticed since doing the wellbeing visits a change in hygiene levels and a visible improvement in mood and general wellbeing for the individuals, as well as I'm feeling hopeful for the future and grateful for Wheatley staff.
Kenny, how long have you been staying here in Belgrove?
3 or 4 years.
And how has it been for you?
It's been okay. It's a roof over my head. Gets me off the streets.
And now you're going to be moving into your own house?
Aye.
How has the process been so far? Did you get your first choice of the house?
Aye.
Yeah, was it the first choice?
I asked for to try it and I just had to wait for it to open.
How was it since Wheatley Care came over?
100,000,000% better.
What made it better?
Them. If you ask them to do something, they help you with anything you need help with.
So what kind of help did they give you?
Like housing, I wouldn't have known how to get in touch with them.
Yeah, housing first.
Housing first. And paperwork, I can't really read or write, so if I need something, I'm not embarrassed to go to them to ask them, what does that say, or can you spell something for me?
This place is brilliant. I've not got a problem with any of the staff. I think the staff are doing a beautiful job. I love it in here, by the way.
The Wheatley Group organisation have come in and took over. I've come in and they've made a lot of changes in here. They've come in, cleanliness and stuff like that. The support we're giving to people. They're there for you anytime, basically, you know what I mean? And so I've actually been moving into my own flat. Come Monday, I've just got a couple of things to get dealt with, and the staff in here are going to help me to do that as well as an aftercare system, because they keep in contact with you for the next 4 to 6 weeks after you move out of here as well. They've been helping me with a food parcel. They're helping me to get my benefits stuff sorted out. They're helping me to sort my rent and stuff, my gas, different things like that. Some people are not used to doing and don't really understand how to go about it, you know what I mean?